to it. Did you get your things in the back? No, it's not that. No, believe it or not, that's one. That's a big one too, and the one we're going to talk about next is a big one. No, it's just a lack of communication. It's not being able to know how to talk to each other, and I've had some horrific times where I've had two couples where it starts out good. And then I find out right away what the problem was because they're starting to like scream and yell at each other right in front of me, So I got to calm them down. I'm going to give you something after we're done here to have fun with that. But so I'll let you turn to James 4 and let's ask Rick tonight if he would open us in prayer for. Amen. Amen. The Bible is full of illustrations, by the way, but we're going to go to James 3 to start this off. It has Ephesians 4 on there, but that's actually for the second part of this first lesson. So keep that in mind. You're going to go to Ephesians 4 shortly. We're going to read the whole thing in chapter 3, and I'm going to just say some brief comments, then we'll get started. Right. It says, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body." You know what he's saying there, right? If you can bridle your tongue, you can usually bridle everything else. "Behold," he says, "also the ships, which though they be so great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue." Right? It's a little member. It boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and it setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue, this is so vital in this chapter, can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therefore, and a lot of people, before I go any further, I'll interject this. A lot of people know how they can hurt with their tongues, and they know how to use them to hurt people with their tongues. "Therefore bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. So out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. It just should be blessing coming out of our mouths. So doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. So who is the wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, in other words, to be accepted, full of mercy, good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy, and the fruit of righteousness is sown in the peace of them that make peace. I just give you briefly, just before we start, which I'll probably teach here at some point if I'm voted back in, is about, I call it the terrible tongue, right? According to these verses, it will cause trouble. That's my first point and the message that I'll give if I get it. It can't be tamed. I should say it won't be tamed, right? It can't be trusted. It must be trained, and you can't be triumphant unless there's Christ involved. I mean, that's what comes out of those verses in my heart, right? It's going to cause trouble. You all know it because you've all said something you shouldn't have said at some point, and you've hurt somebody or whatever, and then it won't be tamed, right? It just feels, that's from the heart. It just feels like I have to say something or I have to do something with my mouth sometimes. That can't be trusted, right? Because the heart is desperate, wicked, and it's fleshly. When we get new hearts in Christ, there's still that old man we have to deal with. And it must be trained. It has to be trained. It's like a child, right? When you're training them to not speak. I remember when I was a little kid, I was trained that if anybody of the cloth came into our house or presence, in other words, priest, pastor, cleric, Jewish rabbi, right? You are not to say one word. I was one who wanted to talk to all of them. That's just the way I was as a kid. And I had to hold myself back from, like saying certain things. And that went across the board. In other words, you don't speak unless you're spoken to, but even then you don't do it unless we give the approval to do it. Right? If I say you can speak, so a lot of times my grandkids in Kentucky, before they'll say something to me, they'll go, look, and can I say, it's that sometimes that, but what they're teaching them is how to discipline themselves so they don't say things that they shouldn't say, right? And then they know when they do say something, it's going to be right. Okay, so that's all on that. But, all right, one of the most famous rhymes of all time is sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Now, according to the Word of God, nothing could be further from the truth. There have been things said to me that I wish I would rather they'd hit me aside the head with a 2x4 than what they said, because it still resonates and has broken my heart. Words do much more than just hurt. They can leave deep wounds, destructive infections, which, if not treated or properly, could bring a lifetime of bitterness or even spiritual or physical death. I mean, somebody could even commit suicide because of the way somebody has talked to them, in a demeaning way. So words can destroy trust like rust is to metal. And words can start wars, words can end marriages. Unless we are biblically trained to recognize these truths, we will fall in the same traps that have destroyed so many relationships, including marriages, families, churches, nations, kingdoms. I mean, we need to identify and evaluate the types of verbal attacks that can hurt us so we can avoid them or address them quickly, effectively when they come. I have a list. This is true. I have a list. I don't know why I keep it. Sometimes I think I'm just dumb. But of all the words that I've been called by so-called Christians, I had a. I can't tell you this illustration because if this person watches it, but I can tell you this, that every word, it still amazes me that you come in for counsel and then be upset over what the counsel is and then call me something from out of the world. I have a list of it. And the reason I keep that list and look at it is it reminds me I'm a nobody, that's all. I'm just a nobody, and it keeps me humble to understand that I'm in this business to help them, not to hurt them. Right? So it keeps me from getting bitter, believe it or not, if I just look at those words once in a while. Now, a lot of those people either really did get saved or really came around and repented and asked for forgiveness also, and now serving the Lord. But that's the kind of stuff that happens. Right? So I'm going to identify for you what words do, what they are, the types that are found in the Bible. The first one is cutting words. Right? Now, in Psalm 55, 12 through 14, and 21, for it was not an enemy that reproached me, he said, then I could have borne it. Neither was it he that hated me that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid myself from him. But it was thou, a man, my equal, my guide, my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together, walked into the house of God in company. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart, and his words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. These words seem to be the most painful. They take the longest time to heal, and sometimes, unfortunately, many people never heal. So a person who has been wounded by these kinds of attacks needs to focus on the trustworthiness of Jesus Christ. And people will leave marriages, listen to me, they will leave churches, they'll leave many other relationships, important relationships, over these type of words, right? Cutting words. But leaving is never the answer. The answer is always Jesus Christ and the relationship that you have with him, that he'll never leave thee nor forsake thee. You know why? Because the grass is never greener someplace else. It isn't. You know, we have some struggles here. I can tell you some of the best churches I know in the nation right now have same type of struggles. You know, and you think you're going to go out and get away from it. We'll talk about that later when we're talking about relationships and what the husband's role and the wife's role is. But so under these attacks, people tend to ostracize themselves from everyone for fear that they will be hurt again. Right? But in reality, finding encouragement from another trusted friend is exactly what they need. And most people, they run out of church. They should actually stay in church because that's where their healing is going to come from a trusted friend or something that's going to help them get through it. Then there's cursing words. Now, cursing words are illustrated by David and his men when Shimei cursed David, and David said, you can read it there, 2 Samuel 16, 10 through 12. He just said, just let him curse. You know, it's just, they don't know, just let him curse, that's all, you know. But I must say this, right? David stopped his men from taking vengeance by showing them the bigger picture. He was just saying God was allowing it to happen. They're lost in ignorance, what he's saying. So thank God that you're counted worthy of being cursed for the Lord's sake, for people who see your commitment to God. And that's why I have that list of words that people have said to me that are born-again Christians. They just don't know any better. They're caught up in something they can't. But anyways, I'll probably say this again. A Christian should never curse. There should never be a curse word come out of a Christian. It's the old person. If it slips, I understand. But it should be immediately dealt with, right? That was not meant to be said. And forgive me, Lord, okay? And then there's criminating words. All right, deliver me, O Lord, from the evil men. Preserve me from the violent men, which imagine mischiefs in their heart. Continually are they gathered together for war. They have sharpened their tongues like a serpent. Adder's poison is under their lips, Selah. You know? These words have an agenda to them. In other words, they're meant to break you down. And these words are like poisonous snake bites that need to be treated right away also. They are words from someone who is trying to start trouble. Sanballat, right, used this approach against Nehemiah, Nehemiah 6:6-7. And Nehemiah nipped it in the bud quickly before it began to cause division or desertion. So these words should not be left untreated. Some words are to be ignored. Other words must be addressed immediately before it affects. And this is the type of words that need to be addressed immediately. Christ never allowed the troublemakers to get away from him without revealing their motives. Right? He just when they're trying to manipulate things, he was quick to make sure everybody knew, no, this is a manipulation. Right? And then there's complaining words. That's number 4. Looking diligently, lest any man fail from the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. And that's the key to that verse in Hebrews 12:15 is that bitterness hurts everybody. When you get bitter against somebody, bitterness just affects everybody that's involved with it, right? Christ never, like I said, but complaining word, these words are self-explanatory. Moses separated the complainers from the rest of the congregation, right? Just as churches are instructed to separate revilers from their fellowship so that they might be ashamed and come to repentance. They need to be addressed when that happens. And it's the truth will always set you free. We know that, right? So the fight is with God, so we must let God fight the battle. And those type of words, the complaining people, there's always going to be complainers. because misery loves company. So the remedy is to stick to the truth. The truth will always set you free. Be patient, be diligent, and make sure these type of words stay separated from the marriage. Then there's controlling words. Now there's I think there's so many YouTube videos on this, and I think you know what I'm talking about when I talk about narcissism. All right? Narcissism, a person who is that way, and by the way, they can be changed. The world wants to tell you they can't, but they can. But the narcissism is just, they know how to use words. They manipulate people. They can turn somebody from a friend to make them an enemy. They just know how to do that because that's how they've gotten along in life. And they use gaslighting procedures. I don't have enough time to talk about that, but I learned a whole lesson on that about gaslighting. All right, the tongue is a fire, world of iniquity, so is the tongue among our members. It defiles the whole body. It sets on fire the course of nature. It is set on the fire of hell. All right, controlling words. Christians, above all others, can be very dogmatic. I think you understand that. Sometimes it's one of the things I wish I had learned earlier in my independent fundamental Baptist, is that you can be a little bit too dogmatic on things and controlling on things, and then push people away, and they don't see the grace or they don't see the mercy. So to the extent that they use words to try and conquer and control those whom they feel are ignorant or inferior to them, pastors can fall into that trap real easily. They can just start dictating. I was talking to somebody this past week, even I said a recent pastor they had was, he was just, you do not do this. If you do this, I'm going to, that type of thing. So some like the power of the tongue. And it gets them what they want. So controlling words make a person feel powerful. Narcissists know how to use words that control their listeners. Our words should always, here I think we had the Blake, right? They should always minister grace to the hearers. Always, especially our spouses, our family members, our kids, parents, right? It has to minister grace. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. Ephesians 4:29. Philippians 1:27. Only let your conversation be as it becometh the gospel of Christ. 1 Peter 1:15. But as he that which calls you is holy, so be holy in all manner of conversation. Now let's talk about lifestyle, but talking is a part of your lifestyle. Right? Our words will condemn us or compliment us. Everything will pass away, now listen to me, but our words. I use on the spot illustrations sometimes. I got to be real careful because who am I saying? But there are some people in my life that are gone now that I'm still hurting over something they said in my family. Right? Everything will pass away, but your words don't. Our words will remain and confront us at the judgment seat also. So we must learn our lessons now so we will know how to handle our accusers and control our tongues later. And good relationships are not built because of absence of problems, right? Because there's going to be problems. So nobody is immune from problems. Everyone's a sinner, and that's all it takes in order to set the stage for conflict. And God made this marriage. We talked all about that last night. And it's two sinners trying to learn to live with each other. So I wrote down here, when a problem arises, it has been allowed by God either to prepare us or to spare us from further problems. It's either to prepare us for things ahead or to spare us, but never to tear us apart. It's never meant that way. So be encouraged, right? Those who know Christ and learn to deal with their tongues biblically can really build solid and lasting relationships. And now we're going to come to the point, right, in a lesson. Now, this is probably the most important thing you got to learn, what I'm going to teach you right now. Now, this isn't mine except for the last point, but this is the one when I was in training for counseling. made the most sense to me because we all get into confrontational spots sometimes, right? So I want to give you these are the 5 rules of communication. So turn over to Ephesians 4, Ephesians 4:25. I would have to be almost positive that Pastor Carpenter at some point talked about putting on and putting off. I think every pastor, but when I was in training out in Indiana, this was the highlight. This is what putting on and putting off was what it was all about. I can give you I have a whole sheet that I made up about putting on and put off. I'll have Melissa copy those for you, and you can take that. It's not in this, but I do have that available to you. All right, so here's the 5 rules of communication. If you don't remember anything else about tonight, remember this, right? The first rule is this: be honest. With yourself and with each other. But I probably could put in there with God also, right? Others can't read your mind, and a husband and wife must respect each other enough to open up without fearing retaliation, right? They must be able to talk with openness and honesty are the 2 most important ingredients in good communication, and good communication is the most important ingredient in a good marriage. When the communication fails, that's when the marriage fails, and that's the number 1 reason marriages split up that I have learned. Just terrible communication. So communication will not work well if either person withdraws themselves from the other or withholds themselves using the silent treatment. And you know what I'm talking about there. Husband and wives can sense their spouse's feelings on a nonverbal level simply by body, facial language. You know, I have to use my wife because I don't want to use too many other people, but I can, if I say something and I see her demeanor change, I don't keep pushing the point, you know, because I know she's hurt at that point. Whatever I said, doesn't matter if it was bad, if it's just she took it that way, so I got to put it back together and say it so that she can understand what I mean. Right? When problems and burdens are not expressed verbally, they become hidden barriers to the marriage relationship, barriers which can cause a sense of isolation to both people. How often have you heard this? Well, my husband has been talking to me about for 3 or 4 days now. You know, I'm hoping he gets over it or whatever. I've heard that all the time. My wife, she hasn't said anything in a week, you know, and you hear these things all the time. And instead of addressing it so they can go to bed, not under the wrath, right? So you can go to bed and sleep, they hold on to it for 2 or 3 days until something breaks the ice. But secrecy, I put down here, sows discord. Your spouse always knows when there's something wrong. Does everybody understand that? Especially women. They got this much better than men, but they'll know right away when there's something wrong with their husband. They just do. I preach right here in this pulpit, and I can go back over to the prophet's chamber, and my wife will say to me, "It was a good message, but what's going on? What's up?" I can tell there was something that, you know. I said, well, I didn't want to let people know, but somebody said something to me before I got in the pulpit, and it was ringing in my head as I'm preaching. She goes, "I'm not saying the message wasn't bad. He goes, I just know you." That's what she says, "I just know you." And most women do know their husbands better than their husbands know them. But still, I can tell also when she is troubled. So, for what man knoweth the things of man, save the spirit of man which is in him. 1 Corinthians 2:11. I don't know what's going on inside your heart, mind. Right? You don't know what's going on inside my heart or mine. I used to tell my kids, you know, before you get into this road rage stuff, you know, you see somebody pulls out in front of you, and you say, "Yeah, what a jerk," and everything else. I said, you might want to think maybe they're headed to the hospital, somebody's dying. Right? You might want to think maybe they just lost a loved one and they're crying and can't keep their on the road. I said, before you start getting, if people get road rage with me, I just wave to them. You know, because I do stupid things sometimes, pull out in front of people, you know, and they blow on the horn, ready, I just go, you know, how you doing? And like they're that's, I think that's the best way to handle it. Anyways, honesty is more, and here's another point. Honesty is more than just not lying. Right? Honesty is telling the truth when it's not convenient to do so. So not lying is not enough. Problems can't be solved unless they're expressed openly and honestly. And a problem cannot be solved by denying it or pretending there is no problem. Wherefore henceforth know we no man after the flesh, yea, though we have known Christ after the flesh, yet now henceforth we know him no more. 1 Corinthians 5:16, and then says in Colossians 3:9, lie not one to another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds. So body language, facial expressions, tones of voice, whispering under your breath, getting a point across through jokes. That's the big one for men. Oh, I was just kidding. No, you said it. But I was just kidding. No, you had to make sure it was said. So, for example, the matter of tone of voice, a salesman will speak in a smooth tone in a persuasive way, yet when he gets home, what's he like? He puts on the voice that would drive customers out of the store. Right? I would hope you'd want to be the same person you are here that you are home, in the privacy of your home. George Heister tells of a tired businessman whose grueling day at the office was kept by a wife's announcement that the cook had walked out. He said, again? Moaned the husband. What was the trouble this time? And his wife charged back, you were. The cook said you were used insulting language to her over the phone this morning, to which the husband confessed, good grief, I thought I was talking to you. You see? Yeah. All right, here's the second rule, and this, to me, all right, is the most important of the 5. All right? You have to keep current. You got to keep current. If you look at Ephesians 4, verse 26, be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. And it says, neither give place to the devil. Now, here's why this one's so important, because I've watched it over and over again. You need to stick to the problem at hand, and what happens is, when a problem rises, it is not the time to bring in every other irritating flaw about that person that bothers you. Right? So say it's a problem about how you use your finances. Well, you don't bring in the garbage either. You know, you don't put the clothes away in the house. But no, we're talking about finances right now, right? And so you keep current. You keep it there. And that's what it says, be angry and sin not. Right? It's not time to bring up past failures. Lying is sin, but anger against the lying is not. Do you all understand that? You know, anger can be energy to solve problems. Anger is sinful when used to attack others. Anger is useful when it's used to hate the sin, but not hate the sinner. So remember, every sin is against God first, and let anger be against sin and not the person. I use this illustration. I found this, it may be in here later, but I'm going to use it right now because it came to my head, is that they did the study, and in New York City, I don't know how many kilowatts it takes to light that city for like 3 months. They say one bolt, if they could just harness 1 bolt of electricity, they could light the city for like a half a year. That's how much is in it. That's what God really is the best illustration about anger. If you can use that for good, right, then, you know, lightning can also destroy things. But if you can use the anger for good because it's against the sin and not against the person who's sinning, right, you're trying to solve a problem here, so you got to keep current, right? Whenever anger is out of control, everything you say is sinful. Everything you say is out of control. It says, Proverbs 25:28, he that has no rule over his own spirit is like a dirty city that is broken down without walls. So here, don't stew over a problem, right? Failure to solve problems daily means we are giving a foothold to Satan. The more time you waste in solving it, the stronger he gets. Does that make sense? The more impact he has upon and opening the way to disappointment, resentment, bitterness, hatred. So when we stew over problems without addressing them, We begin to roll call. And that's role play, excuse me. And that's dangerous. It adds distortion to facts and variables that need not be figured in. Here's another one. Don't clam up. Right? Cutting off communication by crying or threats or silence is unbiblical. It's unhealthy, and an explosion is inevitable. And here's something that my kids learned, and my wife, we use this all the time, but please learn this. Don't use 100% words. You know, like this, like, you always do this. Or you never, that's what I call 100% words. Or that's it. That's a 100% word, like it's over. Or that's just what I expected. Because you 100% expect that all the time. That's what you're saying. Right? That's all I have to say about it. 100%, right? That's it. Not saying anything more. 100% words are added to be vengeful. They're added to be vicious. Right? You never take out the garbage. Yeah, I did last week. You know, I missed it 3 or 4 weeks in a row, but I did take it. It's not true. It's usually 100% word is not true. There can be the same truths with different perspectives, too. And you need to understand that. So deal with the problems by putting yourself in their shoes. Because nobody is 100% wrong 100% of the time, and nobody's 100% right 100% of the time. Take therefore no thought for tomorrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. So let no sun go down upon your wrath. Right? Just take care of it. Also remember, and it says here, he that is first in his own cause seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him out. I want to tell you something. A lot of times when we think we're just right, God will send somebody to interject right in the middle of it and say, you better be careful what you're saying here. Here's 8 questions asked before bringing up a sticky problem. Okay, can somebody grab? Never mind, I see it right there. I can grab it there. Get a little cotton mouth here. Now you're at work, just found something out about your wife or vice versa, and you can't wait to get home, right? Because I'm just going to talk. We need to talk this out. You know, we need to get this. It'd be good just to pray on the way home and think about these things right here. 8 questions to ask before bringing up something that might cause a confrontation. Number 1, do I have all the facts right? Or am I just trying to demand allegiance? You need to listen to me. Right? This is what was said or done or whatever. Make sure you got the facts right. He that answereth a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him. Here's the second one. Should love cover it? All right? Is the offender wrong or sinful? Or is it just the offender annoying? And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity or love covereth a multitude of sins. That's one thing we got to learn, man. It's supposed to cover. You know, and it doesn't sometimes. It just doesn't. For a Christian, it should always cover. When you look at that cross, how can you think any other way? You know, it should cover everything. So anyways, is my timing right? I mean, do I have to jump all over them right now? Or can it be handled differently? I mean, it needs to be addressed, but can it be handled a little differently? Number 4, is my attitude right? Am I trying to help the situation, or am I trying to win an argument? But speak the truth in love may grow up unto him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. But speaking the truth in love, speaking the truth in love. Remember Satan hurt Job in order to win an argument with God? Do you realize that? Will my words be loving? Hatred stirreth up strife, but love covereth all sins. Will my ears be listening? Men, I guess maybe that's more for us. At least I get that a lot of times. Are you listening? And she's not being mean. She's just saying, I just want to make sure I don't have to repeat myself. Are Are you listening, right? See, because I know where your head is sometimes, right? And my head is. I'm in ministry. It's going 1,000 miles a minute. And some of you got jobs, you got people underneath you. And you're thinking about all that all the time. So what do? Yeah, I heard what you said. Well, what did I say? Can you repeat it? You know? And this time I'll catch it, I promise. Here's a real good one. All right? By the way, he says, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak. Right? Have I prayed first for God's help? Prayer is an amazing thing. I think you know that because of how much I preach about it and talk about it and everything else. Prayer can change my attitude in a very short period of time if I'm honest with God and honest about myself and really change everything about the way I'm going to handle something. Am I sticking to the point at hand? Right? Am I sticking to that point? Because we can find a whole lot of things wrong with somebody that, we have great expectations out of people, and when they fail us, well, you're failing somebody too in their expectations. I hope you all understand that. So keep current. Keep current. Your sinful tendency is to bring in every other fault that bothers you. Now, here's the third rule. And this one should be self-explanatory. Attack the problem, never the person. There's a problem, and we had a tendency to make the person the problem. Right? The person you have the problem with is not the problem. The problem is the wrong way you handle the person. And a problem with the heart is always a problem with the heart. It's always heart issues. And someday if I'm like I said, I'm still here. I'll talk to you all about that stuff about the heart, how it just gets us in trouble. So every problem not handled correctly is rooted, now listen to me, in pride. It's rooted in pride. No one wants to be wrong or told what to do. So avoid unwholesome words, right? Now, what are words like that? Well, that's attacks a person's character. Right? A word, I like Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like the apples of gold and pitchers of silver, right? Like words like, don't be stupid, or are not fitly spoken. Right? You're a moron. That's not fitly spoken. A bona fide Christian doesn't use those type of words, Words that tear down, tear apart, and hinder growth. Like this. Well, I give up. Or you're impossible. Or I can't see how we can resolve this. What you're doing is you're acting like the person you're talking to is a moron, and that only one that understands it is you. Even so, the tongue is a little member, right, that boasts great things. Words that bypass the issue. A double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. Words that grieve the Holy Spirit. Grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you're sealed. Use edifying words, but speak truth in love. Grow up into him all things, which is the head, even Christ. So the two ways we are to speak in truth and in love, we are to use words that edify and never terrify somebody, never tear somebody down. It just gives grace to those who hear. Those words that zero in on conflict solutions, not on combat executions. I mean, that's what you want to do. You want to find a solution here. So this rule can be violated by saying one thing and your body language says another. Here's the fourth rule. And this is one I think, I don't know how to put this, but I sort of learned this when raising kids. Right? I could react instead of acting. Do you know what I'm saying when I say that? Like they're doing something and just react like with, what are you, stop it, instead of acting like to their benefit. So act, don't react. The goal is resolution, not retaliation. And that's the put off stuff. Put off the refusal to forgive someone when they have hurt you. And then wrath, flaring outbursts of anger. anger, hostility, frequently seeks revenge, slow burn, clamor, harsh contention, quarreling, brawling, evil speaking, slander, speech that injures, malice, a desire to see them suffer. So the natural tendency of the Genesis 3 natures is to be defensive about dealing with your own sins and put on things like helpful. How's it going to help? How's it going to be courteous? Tenderheartedness, compassion, right? Sympathetic. In other words, again, putting your feet into their shoes and seeing maybe how it feels to you if you're in their shoes, right? Forgiveness, giving up the right to revenge. That's what forgiveness is. Giving up the right to have a revenge against somebody or to hold a grudge. You, through the help of the Spirit of God, must learn to be kind, tenderhearted, forgiving. It takes patience. It takes a lot of work, perseverance, but it can be done. Plenty have been successful before you, and plenty will be successful after you. Now, here's the fifth rule, and we're going to have some fun for a minute here before, and we're going to close this first session. All right. Speak with courtesy. Can somebody hand out them sponges right there to everybody? I think I got enough to get a sponge to everybody in here. Now, you're going to laugh at this, but please let it be an illustration. When I say speak with courtesy, it revolves around respectful listening, not just respectful talking. By carefully thinking about what you're going to say as to not be arrogant or abrasive or abusive, right? Changing old habits not easy, but it can be done. It's never a question of whether you can. It's always a question of whether you will or will not, or can or can't. So 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "There have no temptation taking you such as common to man, but God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you're able, but will with the temptation make also a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it." I said that wrong. It's never a question of whether you can or can't. It's always a question of whether you will or you won't. And I wrote down here, think before you speak. So y'all got your sponges? I'm going to ask you to do something with them in just a second, and then I'm going to explain what I'm talking about, all right? Think before you speak. Will my timing be right? Do I have all the facts? Can it wait, right? Thanks. I think I have one, yeah. I got a couple now. Will it be honest without exaggeration or embellishment? Will it be impartial, or is it selfish, an agenda in it? Is it needful for resolution? Will it fix things or make things worse? And will it be kind or offensive? That illustration I gave there has been picked up and preached a lot of places. I don't know if it's mine, proprietary. I think it is, but I don't know. Anyways, is your goal to please God first? All conflicts can be either averted or resolved if it is. When I'm embarrassed to even tell you some of this, but I've had some counseling sessions where the spouse physically attacked the other spouse. Talk about trying to figure out how to handle that. I mean, I just don't know. And mostly the reason that come to that point is because one would not let the other one say something and finish their thought. All right? All right, you got a sponge in your hand, right? I want you to pick somebody, maybe your spouse or somebody. I want you to throw it as hard as you can at them. All right, you're going to keep these afterwards, by the way. Just throw it hard and see if you can just... All right. All right. Can you read what's on this here? Can you read what's on this one? Right? Can you read what's on this? It's a brick, right? All right, so here's what happens. They're talking, and instead of letting the person finish their thought, I swear to you, I believe this, if the one who's trying to get a word in had a brick, they would have threw it at the other person just as hard as they could. I literally had someone, a wife, punch her husband in the face. And he just went like, where'd that come from? You know? And it all started, listen, it's just because when we talk, we got to learn to listen. Right? So what I do in a counseling session, I hand that to them and I say, when the person is talking, when they're holding the brick, right? You don't say a word. The other spouse has to be completely quiet until they're finished what they want to say. Then you can hand over the brick, right, to the other person.
Is there a timer?
Yeah. Well, usually I try to let people finish their thought out because that's the key. That's why these confrontations happen. You're not willing to hear the other person out. You're just not willing to hear what they have to say, and right away you're jumping back with something right back in their face before they even got a chance to say. But this way here, it gives them both ample time, right, to say what they have to say, and then okay, now you're done. Pass the brick. Right? And that brings levity because if somebody starts in, I'll go throw it. And they'll throw it, and they'll both giggle a little bit. And then I try to make that a serious no. Now, if that was a brick, would you still throw that? Right? Because you were acting like that's what you would have done. Okay? That's the key. I added that last point myself about being courteous. Give the person a chance to talk and finish their thought. And then, right, when it's in your hand, you can reply and do that. You know, I find in a lot of marriages that when somebody's talking, the spouse is quick to correct them when they're saying it. I don't know. And, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I was down. Oh, no, it didn't happen that way. Well, wait a minute, I'm not finished the story. No, it didn't happen that way. It went like this, you know. Do you know what I'm saying? And if we just listen out, and probably some of the things you wouldn't even have to say. You wouldn't even have to say it didn't happen that way. It doesn't, because it didn't matter how it happened. It's just did it happen, and everybody understand that? Yeah. If we just let the person finish the thought, I think we'd avoid a lot of confrontations that would eventually lead to separations. Amen? So let's take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, and we're going to touch a very touchy area. And Luke, when I go through this next, it's very hard for me to teach this next one. I might have to say cut it off. We need we need theater lights, like out there in the lobby where it flashes. Show's about to begin. Right. Before we get started here, Shane has something wants to add. I thought it was really cool. Come on up here. Come on up here. This is something she teaches her kids, so talk louder unless you want to talk into my chest here.
I'll just talk right here.
All right.
So it was funny he was using the analogy of a brick but using a sponge. And I teach my kids when you're listening, if you're listening to respond, it's like a brick. You're pouring water on a brick and it's not going in. But if you're listening to hear, it's a sponge and it soaks up the water. So I just thought that was confirmation.
It's all good stuff. When any of you think you got good things like that, we want to hear. We all want to hear it. All right? We all have family members and all that stuff. We want to hear it. All right, we're about to go into the elephant in the room. Let me just say a couple things before I start. I really believe this is important to learn because the world is teaching our kids and teaching even people the wrong things about sexual relations. And I think if we don't get it right as parents or grandparents, and they're going to learn it somewhere. I mean, a lot of people, when I was growing up, it was like, I was telling Tony this, it was either like sex was bad, don't ever do it, or we're not going to talk about it. And nothing was explained about anything. And it's not that you have to set somebody down like the birds and bees. A lot of it's just through example. People can see it and understand it, what's right and what isn't right. We're not going to talk about contraception tonight because there's a lot of different views on that. If you want my view on that, I will give you it. I have a thing, years ago I wrote a whole thing about it. I'd have to find it in my files. I'll print it off and you can have that, okay? Because some people think, it's not good or it is good or whatever, like you're disobeying God. I'll just tell you how I come to my conclusion, and you have to come to your own conclusion. So Hebrews 13:4 is where we're going to go. But this is, honestly, is just, we have to talk about these things. And the first part of this lesson, I talked to my girls, and mostly my girls, and then I think I did anyways. I hope I did. The second part of this lesson. But it says in Hebrews 13, verse 4, marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Now, that's not in the Old Testament. That's in the New Testament. That's under grace, mercy, everything else. That's one place where God says, I will judge this. Okay, so this is one topic where people's interest is as old as time. It goes all the way back to Genesis and the story of creation. Male and female, he created them. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. So we're very much aware today that God created us male, female, but now we're even questioning that, obviously. And everything is being distorted about sexual relations, and anything God says about sexual relations is being discredited, and they act like there's nothing in the Bible that teaches about it. Well, you ought to read the Song of Solomon sometime. I mean, if you put that in today's vernacular, it can be almost X-rated. It could be R-rated at least. All right, if you look up the the Hebrew and what was saying and what they were saying there. So, have you noticed how nearly everything revolves around it today? Right? All these discussions center around what's moral, immoral. It's in all of your commercials. It's in all of your advertisements in Hollywood. Everything. You can't watch a TV sitcom without them bringing in something about sex, whether it be same-sex stuff or just they're in a bed together or whatever. So So I said before marriage, we want to know how far a person can go without going too far, how much can they safely get away with without being labeled an adulterer or a fornicator. And remember, I wrote this thing 15 years ago. So then we get married and we ask what is acceptable, unacceptable in the bedroom concerning sexual intimacy. And sex is so often treated like a plague by parents when their kids are young and they never learn anything about it. They treat it like it's a forbidden experience. You know, you stay away from boys, you stay away from girls. But the way we talk about sex reveals the dilemma in which we find ourselves. So on one hand, we're told that it's terrific, and then on the other hand, we're told it's terrible as a kid, and we don't know what to believe or how far to go. And anyways, it's not forbidden. And it's not meant to be guilt, to cause you guilt, so you're guilt-ridden. A sexual relationship between a husband and wife can increase in its fulfillment and joy throughout its entire married life. Right? In fifth chapter of Ephesians, the Apostle Paul counsels husbands and wives to submit yourselves to one another out of reverence for Christ. So that drive within us to have consensual sex is partly due to the sexual commission given to us by Christ at creation. It's just in us. So, but now this sexual desire is being driven by the movie industry, by the advertisement industry, the fashion industry. It draws a lot of attention, billions of dollars in pornography right now. So there's the male who is not completely satisfied with himself, female who feels so insufficient, because they're watching these stupid things on the internet, and that makes it sound like it's this, like this fantasy type of stuff, and when one doesn't meet up to the other's expectations, then it all goes sour. They think the entertainment industry will satisfy those insufficiencies, so then they go and they try to find more, but the exact opposite happens because it's not real life. Women were made to simply complete men, and men to complete women, anatomically, biologically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Thus, the sex drive springs from the longing for completion and for companionship. So we must be very careful here to note that Christ alone can compete. Very careful to note that Christ alone can complete that longing for companionship. He can and will fill that void. Paul found the completion of Christ to the point where he did not even need a female for completion. I don't know if he was married at one time. It certainly wasn't in all of his journey. There's nothing mentioned about any woman in his life. So, and then he even talked about that, about remaining single. And if you can't control your sexual desires, right, don't remain single. Christ should sustain us through life as believers in him first, period. And then if God chooses or refuses to give you a mate, right, we can still rest in Christ. That's the whole thing. But I would not have you, without carefulness, he that is unmarried, care for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married, care for the things that are of the world, and how he may please his wife. So you can see that in 1 Corinthians 7 and 32. It is very much a necessity for a married couple to nourish their sexual intimacy throughout their lifetime. And one very important way to do that, nourish romance, is to have mini honeymoons, I call it. Right? This is especially crucial after a couple has children, and furthermore, these short breaks of 1 or 2 days away from home is good, I think, in some romantic setting. They're very helpful to the growth of romance. It's also helpful for every married couple to have a lock on their bedroom door, so that some variety in timing, I put down there, of romantic activity can occur it spontaneously without alarming the kids and stuff like that. You can read most of this. I'm just reading it because I'm embarrassed, but it's hard for me to. But I had to write it because, and you'll see why at the end, at the illustration. Variety in both time and place become invigorating ingredients in developing a romantic relationship. A husband needs to realize that being a good lover includes a continual courtship of his wife. He needs to know that her sexual needs include occasionally having her husband show interest in her, investing time in her. A wife needs to realize her vocation in marriage is to be frequently seductive to her husband, proving to him her need for him and want for him and only him. She should enjoy this vocation as a positive and rewarding facet of marriage. So, to put it simply, What I'm trying to convey here tonight is it is a ministry. It is a ministry. By using imagination and creativity, both husband and wife can have frequent love affairs with each other. In the process, they'll discover increasing dimensions of joy in their relationship. And one of the happiest facts about married life is that husbands and wives have the opportunity and the responsibility to work at becoming increasingly proficient at loving each other. Right? Not just in the act itself, but just how to love each other, by paying attention to each other, by fulfilling one another's needs, and by assuming responsibility for the other's satisfaction. The love life of a couple will become a lifelong fulfilling experience. But I don't like that word sex. Right? Sex is one word that believers need to rescue from the misuse of the world. So we're going to, from here on, I'm going to try to, and I have to use it once in a while, but we're going to it's going to be about making love, okay? That's more, I like that better. All right, number one is this. And making love in marriage is to be pure and holy. Now, I'm going to give you some worldviews here in just a second, right? The pagan view said sex of any kind was an impure, sinful necessity. So the Christian view is that it's holy, it's a pure blessing from God. The truth is, making love was created by God before sin and was encouraged by God. It is an important, vital ministry of every marriage, right? God saw that everything that he had made, and behold it, and it was, it was very good. So after sin and the fall of man, God still called making love good and honorable in the marriage only. Right? Because it said there in Hebrews 13:4, it's honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. Right? So that's the only place for it to happen, is between a married couple in a married couple's bedroom. So let me just give you some of these things, sinful views, world views, and just to give you just for a matter of, you can read them along. But the world view is you wouldn't buy a car without a test drive, so why get married before having sex? Well, God's answer is a car is an object. It's designed to be used repeatedly, and test drive is a wise decision. A person is not an object. Right? He or she is a unique creation, the image of God. People should be loved and respected just for that. Right? The worldview, sex before marriage is a good idea to be sure you're sexually compatible. If you've been in this so far, you know what I said about that. In India, marriages are arranged, and they got the lowest divorce rate in the world. Right? And why? Because they learn how to love each other, and anybody can do that. Everybody's compatible. God does have a certain person for you, but it's just that everybody's compatible. He created all men and women, right, sexually compatible, and compatibility only arises when there's comparisons of different sexual relations. That's all it is. It's the enemy of contentment. Comparison is the enemy of contentment. So a couple in a monogamous relationship with God will experience a compatible relationship with each other. Thirdly, the worldview, sex is a natural human function similar to eating or sleeping. And a variety of sexual partners adds to the enjoyment, like eating in different establishments. God's answer is making love is a natural human function, but it is not as common as eating and sleeping. It involves the mind as well as the body of two people, and you want the relationship to be approved of God and one of giving and sharing and having Him. Just remember this: God sees in your bedroom too. Does everybody know that? He doesn't just, well, I don't want to watch this. So it's just a relationship approved by God is one that's giving and sharing in a bodily function. So it's a mutual ministry. 4, worldview, Christians say no to sex because parents don't want kids to have fun. You ever heard that? When you warn your children about it. God's answer says no to premarital sex in any form as an act of safety, as an act of security and sanctity. Because we do believe in having fun. And God wants us to have fun. You'll hear me say somewhere in here about, it's pleasurable to do it. And it's just like your tongue with taste buds. You didn't have to put those in your tongue. You could just eat food. Didn't have to put color, so you can see the colors. He wants you to be pleased. He wants you to be blessed. So it's honorable in all. And then the worldview, Christians don't have sex, which explains the sour look on their faces. I had to take that from someplace else, but this one is so foolish it must be. But it's got to be addressed, right? Because God's answer, faithful Christians never have a reason for a sour look on their faces. They should never have a reason. God designed lovemaking as a special gift to be shared only with your spouse. And the Bible contains a variety of sexual stories hotter than most movies. In the Bible it does, but they're meant to be within the confines of God's will. So hopefully I can, show you things like that God does love to give us pleasure, and taste buds are to enjoy food, and color is to enjoy sight, and making love is to enjoy intimacy with each other. 6, the worldview, having sex is a mark of manhood. You ever hear the word sowing your oats? Right? That was used in my bringing up. And having sex before marriage shows a lack of self-control, a lack of discipline, a lack of respect for others, for God, for the one you're not controlling yourself over. None of these things are mature qualities of a manhood or womanhood, but rather a sign of immaturity. The verses are there, so you can just read them through. 7, the worldview, living together before marriage is the best way to determine compatibility. And I know some parents that actually allow their kids, they're not married, as long as they do it in the bedroom that's in their house, then that's okay because I got an eye on them. That's sad to me. God's answer has said everyone's compatible. In India, like I said, they arrange marriages. But we certainly don't want to try to promote that type of behavior, right, before the marriage. So with that said, let me give you some things here. I got a number here, unless I must have put wrong. Should be 8, I think. Making love or having what some call good sex is not a prerequisite for a good marriage. My thing says 2. I don't know what yours says. Now let me just hit this for a minute. Sex shouldn't be the most important part of a marriage. Or lovemaking should be. But it is very important. I understand, we all understand that. If you don't participate wholeheartedly and passionately in it, you're really neglecting your spouse. But marriage success is not based on sexual success, but sexual success is based on marital success. So, as the scriptures say, for this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother, unite with his wife, the two shall become one flesh. That's the union longed for. However, it's more than just sexual. There's so much more to it. It's a longing for personal intimacy and a personal union. And many couples lose some of their sexual drive as they get older. And this is not unusual or mean there's a dysfunction. Right? There are many variables which can hinder its enjoyment over the years, and we understand that, right? But that's the time when cuddling is fun and doing things together. I know it's kind of hard for me to even teach this, because I'm getting older, right? But I'm just telling you, there's other ways to bless each other, and be with each other, and still find that intimacy through the years. It's not merely a matter of repeating this ecstasy whenever it is desired. It's rather a matter of a ministry to your spouse to develop a growing, lifelong experience that just gets better and better and better as you get older. So because we have seen lovemaking as a singular event instead of a growing experience, we at some point may decide that marriage doesn't really give the fulfillment we thought it would. You see what I'm saying? And then we get a wrong view. And then that's why people in the middle, have been married for 20 years, and all of a sudden they decide, well, this is it. Have to find somebody else. So the sexual relationship is learned. It's not simply handed down like learning about the birds and the bees from mom and dad. Husbands and wives will teach each other about that process while they're in the process. I hope everybody understands what I'm saying, and I hope you don't hold anything against me, but I think it needs to be taught. If we were no longer able to make love with your spouse, would you still be committed to her or him in your marriage? Because a good sexual relationship is not the key to a good marital relationship. The key to the most delightful sexual relationship is a good marital relationship. And here's the first thing. The primary goal of lovemaking is giving. There are 3 primary reasons for making love. Here they are. Lovemaking is to produce people. Giving people back to God. Some of you have done very well at that here. Got a lot of kids. God's going to you're pleased with you. Right? Lovemaking is to provide pleasure for your spouse. Right? It's a giving thing. And also, here's the one we forget about and we don't teach enough, is lovemaking is to promote purity that only marriage can provide. But now we're learning that kids are learning nothing about purity. Right? It's supposed to be within just the confines of that marriage in that bedroom, and it's pure, it's innocence. That's what I'm saying. It's innocence, when especially this is your first encounter. Sex outside of marriage of any kind disrespects the cross Jesus had to bear to have a purified groom, right? Or bride, a purified bride, and so he's a purified groom, but he could have a purified bride, his church. He died for his bride, the church, so that it would be saved and purified. That's what it says. Ephesians 5:25-27 says, husbands, love your wives even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it, cleanse it with the washing of water by the word, that he might present it to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that it should be holy and without blemish. And I skipped over that one verse about, know ye not that your bodies are the members of Christ? Not your own? Right? Giving is the backbone of biblical teaching. It really is. It was taught by Paul and demonstrated by Jesus. God loves cheerful givers, and each spouse is given the privilege and duty of keeping the other spouse satisfied, not just sexually, but in all aspects of life. It's giving of oneself to the other. Jesus was our greatest example. For God so loved the world that what? He gave himself, his only begotten Son, right? So this principle opposes, now listen to me, pornography, the use of it, fornication, masturbation, even the abomination of sodomy. These are all childlike, juvenile, and most of all, selfish desires that focus on just self. The goal of sexual relations is satisfying your spouse, and this may or may not include, euphoric moments, as the world would teach. Some might ask, how do I know what pleases my mate? Well, God's good communication is the key, and we just went through all of that. Take time to listen. And you'd be surprised what you'll hear if you just take time to listen, instead of making it like this animalistic thing, Make it more of a ministry thing. 4, God created both husband and wife with equal ability to satisfy each other. She has not power over her own body but the husband, and likewise also a husband hath not power over his own body but the wife. So now what we're going to teach right now is this. And now this is something I've taught in a teenage class, so this is okay for us. I'm not trying to be chauvinistic here, but I think girls need to hear this the most, because sometimes boys in the teenage have like one agenda. And I hate to say that, but they do. They're more motivated by sight, and girls are more motivated by touch. And so I teach this, and if you recognize these 4 truths I'm about to teach you, realize how God has reserved love making for the undefiled bed in marriage in order to satisfy your spouse and give the union in its fullest potential of success. Now, I don't actually say that to the teens when I'm talking to them, but I do say this. You have to recognize that your body belongs to you, or you could put me there, that it belongs to me. It's your body. It's God, He owns it, but it's your body. So I value what God has given to me. He's given me the ability to make the right choices. I can keep my body pure. I value my moral purity. I will preserve it. I will not compromise it when it comes to having sex. Right? So you have to first realize that He gave you that body, right? And you want to, that's your body to value because he created you. And then secondly, I got to recognize that my body belongs to my spouse, right? So I tell the teenage kids, there's somebody out there that God's got planned for you, and your body belongs to that person. It's simple, right? The wife has not power over her own body, but the husband likewise. So I am obligated to stay faithful, right, and pure, so that for my spouse that's coming. Right? My body belongs to the one person God has for me, so with no regrets and no guilt, I'm going to give all myself to him or her when that time comes, out of honoring God. Here's the next one. Here's the one that we forget about, and the ones that are always the children that have to suffer through all of these things I must recognize that my body belongs to my children. I want you to think about this, right? I want to pass on a legacy of moral purity and faithfulness to my children. I don't want to have to regret telling them that I chose to be immoral, or they came from a relationship that wasn't made in heaven, the way we act as parents is detrimental, or just the opposite, to our children. And you don't see it when you're there and you're in this, and you don't see what's going on in a kid's mind. I do. I'm almost 70 now. I see how they turn out afterwards. And I can stand here absolutely for sure, when you mess up in the marriage and you keep doing, and these children are going to end up rebellion. They're going to go the way, thank God if you trained them up in the way they should go, they'll come back. But I'm just saying, you could spare them a lot of stuff if you just do it God's way. And then I recognize that my body belongs to my God. It's his, right? So my body was made by God, redeemed unto salvation by his own blood. If the undefiled bed pleases God, it will magnify the love-making process. Each one of us is to use their body to satisfy their spouse and their spouse only. This is a command. It's not a suggestion. A husband desires a response from his wife, and a wife desires respect from her husband. So the primary factor that hinders a wife from responding is feeling used instead of appreciated. Right? The primary factor that hinders a husband is feeling inadequate, feeling he's not provided or he's not respected. Now, I think this is okay, right? You said you think it'd be okay. All right. I got to just check because I want to make sure. She put this together for me. There's basically 4 stages of sexual satisfaction. Now, why do I bring this up? Why do you think I would bring this up? That there's 4 stages, basically. Because a lot of people today, they're being taught, you just jump right into the last stage. You just jump right into it. Right? Here they are. And this isn't from me, but there's anticipation, innuendos, playful hints. There's imagination, right? Flirting, luring. There's stimulation, right? Touching, kissing, caressing. And then there's culmination, right? Intercourse, climax. So generally speaking, men are excited by what they see, women are excited by what they feel. Just glimpses of nakedness will arouse a man, cuddling and caressing will arouse a woman. Everything has different levels of sexual arousal, and this is part of the weaving together process. So oversexed, undersexed are worldly terms which sound like a genetic problem. Listen, just stick to the Word of God. Rest assured there's no problem, just another challenge and by God's design in the beautiful process of learning to get to know each other. It's not to be forbidden, but it's acceptable and encouraged. It says in Proverbs 5:18-19, let thy fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Right? Let her be as a loving hind, a pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her. It's accepted, encouraged by God to delight in your spouse. It is accepted, encouraged by God to delight in the process of making love. And this is where it's hard, but it says, let her breast satisfy you at all times. It's God's way of saying, delight in the making love process. Right? That's all that means, right? The word wife teaches the real that real sexual delight can and should only come from the marriage. So sex outside the marriage is pleasurable for a moment, but it comes with it consequences. And one of the main ones is guilt. You know? So it can be sex can only be satisfied or making love or completely quenched in an undefiled bed that only marriage can provide. Ravish is a word, it says there, we just read in Proverbs 5, has the idea of being intoxicated with her love or with his love, right? Intoxicated and overwhelmed. There's a word in the Song of Solomon. I had to do a study on it because I couldn't figure out what they meant. They talk about the banqueting house. Do you know what a banqueting house is in the Bible? It's a place where they get drunk, right? It's a place where they would gather to drink and party and get drunk. And I said, how does that fit in? Well, that's the way, what the analogy that God is using is that you're drunk in love with your spouse. You're just ravished with her or him. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence. That means unconditional kindness. And likewise also the wife unto the husband. This is a true story. I got 1,000 of them, by the way, and you'll hear the one in the end. I hate even telling every time I do, but this is a good one, all right? Because I know the couple, a young couple, who after a couple of years of courtship without sex, called home from their honeymoon. And when mom asked how everything is going, she was just saying, how's the honeymoon going? The bride says, you never told me having sex would be so much fun. It was so innocent. Right? I'm so glad I waited for it, she said. Sexual relations are to be continuous. It does say in 1 Corinthians 7:5, defraud ye not one another except to be for consent of time. It does not mean through withhold through deceit, like using sex as a bargaining tool. That's not what that means. Where there's abstinence, it should be by mutual consent and a specific period of time for a legitimate reason to come back together. The 4 biblical guidelines for refraining from sex with each other is during that guidelines of 1 Corinthians 7, and talking about in the marriage, you both need to agree. That's the first thing. Second, a specific time has to be determined by both of you, and then there needs to be a specific goal. That's to solve the problem, to reconcile, whatever it is, and it is to be terminated by returning to the sexual relations again. So this should be kept to the shortest time possible, is not to let Satan sneak in with temptation, put somebody else in your life. You know, that's what happens. I always told my kids, just before the legitimate comes in, he sends a counterfeit. Satan does. And you think, oh, this is the guy or this is the girl, and then all of a sudden you find out you got the wrong one because you were just hasty and everything. So this should be kept to the shortest period of time, not to let Satan sneak in with temptation. Satan knows how to put somebody in your life who's going to tell you everything you wanted to hear. I'm just telling you all, he does. He just knows how to do it. You're hurting, you're whatever it is, and your marriage relationship's not going through. I always said and you don't have to say too much to get somebody to, when somebody, especially a female, she's hurting. I said, I told somebody I was teaching this recently, I said, all the pastor has to say to somebody that he's counseling that they're hurting is say, you know, if I was married to you, I would never treat you that way. That's all that plants that seed. That's it. And he may have been sincere, but it's just that's all. Just that statement will plant a seed. And that's why you got to stay away from that stuff, you know. That's why I'm careful. I just had Tony put the camera in my room. I never talk to anybody in private. I try never to anyways, because I don't want to plant any type of innuendos. It's very important I close this session with a severe warning. Unlike the sexual bliss that is approved of by God, sexual sins are an abomination to him. And with them come severe consequences like the birth of an innocent baby or uncommitted moms and dads that, that let their children be abused, unwanted diseases, medical problems, even in some cases death. So if you really don't want to mess up, right, your spiritual and physical life, nor the innocent life of your children, you need to consider very seriously the route you're taking concerning this type of behavior. Right? Only the ways of God are safe. Only his ways are satisfying. They're the only ways that are undefiled. By not submitting to his will concerning sexual relations, you could be robbing yourself from a lifetime of enjoyment and bring unto yourself a lifetime of regret. There are many questions that will arise about what is defiled and undefiled in the bedroom, and so I want to talk about just a couple of those things. One of the two things are masturbation and oral sex, are two areas that raise questions, right? Now, I'm not here to even talk about those things. That's not what I'm doing. But I do want to tell you what the Bible says about certain things, right? We need not get into details of what is acceptable and not acceptable, but I personally believe if you treat your bedroom like any other area of your life, that Jesus is right there also. If you treat it that way, the Holy Spirit will convict you of areas you shouldn't be involved with or areas you should be involved with or encourage you to be involved with. So here's what I wrote. This is what I wrote. That's what I teach, is that are there red flags? Okay, are there red flags? Well, what would be some of the red flags? Well, does it feel natural or unnatural? Does it feel like a natural use of the body part or unnatural use of the body part, right? Look what it says in Romans 1:26-27. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections. For even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also men, leaving the natural use of women, right? Burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was met. Here's the second thing. Is it comfortable? Does it feel comfortable or uncomfortable when you do it? Does it make you feel ashamed or dirty or guilty, or does it make you feel good? I just when I teach, I say, would it embarrass you if others knew that you were doing it? The Bible implies if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. But on the other hand, listen to me, we must remember that if it feels right to us and the Bible clearly says it's wrong, it's wrong. Does it feel, here's the next one, does it feel healthy or harmful? What they don't tell you in the LGBTQTIZVW world, there's a lot of sickness in that world because of this. A lot. And there's a lot of stuff going on, tearing of stuff that where body parts shouldn't be. But they don't tell you about that. Right? If there were possible health concerns, it would be harmful. So do you feel like you're pushing the envelope or you're enjoying the moment? I don't need to elaborate on what could result if you think it might not be helpful to your marriage. I mean, it's just amazing, right? Like I said, I'm not a therapist, sex therapist. I'm just a pastor that I read and study the Bible. Right? Is it moral or could it be considered biblically immoral? Do you know what today's definition of sodomy in Webster's dictionary is? Anal or oral copulation with another person. So copulation is to engage in sexual intercourse. So that suggests that when sodomy replaces what God ordains as acceptable for copulation, it would suggest, I think, that it's wrong. So you have to decide what sodomy means to you, whether it's allowed in the confines of your marriage. I can't answer that. I don't know. All I know is sodomy, when done with someone of the likes of the same sex, is clearly immoral. And it's clearly an abomination to God. I mean, think about Sodom and Gomorrah. If it's all of a sudden okay with God to do this stuff, he's got a lot of people to apologize to when they get to heaven. If they get there. Is it moral or could it be considered biblically immoral? Do you think God would give his approval to it if you were to ask him and he would answer you. Well, he does answer. So why not ask him about it? Let him show you. I believe the Bible clearly indicates that if it feels unnatural, abnormal, uncomfortable, or unhealthy, it is indeed immoral and defiled. Because we want to keep that bedroom undefiled. Now here's the illustration. I'm done. I hate teaching this class. I'm just giving you my view from the perspective of the Bible, what it teaches. But this is why I do it, is this illustration right here. I have counseled, I got to be careful how I say this, just about everything that could possibly go wrong in someone's life. I've counseled murderers, sex offenders. I can't even tell you all the stuff that through the years, it's just, it's been heavy. It's been real heavy. And every time I get into another, where it's another heavy situation, I say, I don't know how much more I can take of this. But this is why I do this, right? Because of what the world is teaching our children. And these issues go often untaught in the home and in the church. Usually this topic is left to schools or peers and the world. And we have a responsibility to take the right stand, teach this uncomfortable subject matter in a right and comfortable way. If we don't, they're going to learn from the world. And here's the illustration. I once had a woman come to me on behalf of her sister and teenage niece. And the mother of her niece found a note she had written to her boyfriend in school. In that note, the girl made a reference of performing oral sex with her boyfriend. Now, when this girl was confronted by her mother, when she read it, she told her mother it wasn't sex. Now, every time I tell the story, usually you come to the conclusion before the end. She said that, I promised you, Mom, I would keep myself for marriage. And her mother obviously said, where in the world did you come up with that conclusion that that's not sex or having some type of sexual relation? And here's what she said. President Bill Clinton said so. And that's the president you told me that you like. You see what I'm saying? So why do I go through this stuff? You can agree with me on something, disagree with me. It doesn't really matter. If we don't teach our children, this is what they're going to learn from the world. These are the things they're going to learn. Now, it's not up for the pastor to teach children about it. It's up to you parents. Right? They need to see you living the way you're supposed to be living so they don't get the wrong impression. They need to hear you speaking what's right and what's wrong so that they get the right impression in life about this very, very touchy subject, okay? And that's all I'm going to say about it. All I know is I love you all, and thank you for praying for me because I don't like going through that. But I just think it's important. That's all. So let me close in prayer and be safe going home. And then we got some really good things ahead of us, too, in the next couple of days. Father, thank you for your love for us. And to think, Lord, that you desired for us to enjoy each other in marriage. To the point you even gave us some, euphoric moments where we can just enjoy the moment together. Lord, I just thank you for these people that they're here, they're listening, Lord. They want to hear from you. I don't want to say anything that would lead them in the wrong direction. But I do believe with all my heart, Lord, that you've asked me to do this and do it in a way that would just at least put some warnings out there. Because the world has got a hold of our kids today, and we want to make sure that we break that hold with all of the teachings that you give us in your word, and especially in this church. So bless these people, Lord, I pray, and I pray that this will be a wonderful night ahead of them. In Jesus' name, amen.